Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Exos Heroes. And today we'll be looking at the new Fate core of the Summer Fest lineup, which is Holiday at the White Ocean Iris. So I'm sure everyone is super excited about this Fate core. We've been waiting for 3 weeks now to finally get our very first gold Fate core of this lineup. And at first glance, I would say she is definitely worth summoning for. And that's the whole point of this episode is, we're gonna take a look at whether she is worth it, whether you should be using all of your axes. And like I said, so far, looks great. So let's take a look at what she has to offer. So the biggest change, I think, with the new Iris Fate core is the fact that it seems to be dev's way to counterbalance the current meta, which is, very heavy with the first Guardians and all their shieldings. So let's take a look at how she does that. Like all the other Summerfest Fate cores, obviously she gets upgraded A1 and A2 as well, which is unique. So let's take a look at her A1. So now what it does is it removes all status effect from all allies, which I think is the same as it used to be. But her old A1 used to have a shield for the entire team. Now it doesn't have that, but instead it grants 2 mana to everyone on your team. And I believe the old A1 has just 1 mana, so now it goes up from 1 to 2. So essentially, at a requirement of 1 mana, you're able to transfer 8 mana to the rest of your team, 2 for each of your allies, and that's pretty substantial. That's huge. Is it worth getting rid of the shield? I'm not so sure. I think it's going to be a lot more situational. I think in certain cases you would like to see the shielding. But I think one thing that's unique is if you're facing another Summerfest Iris, then obviously your shielding wouldn't be as useful because the opponent's Iris like you will be able to remove the shielding. So her skill now, the fact that it just does more mana transfer actually works well in that sense. But I can see in a lot of PvP situations, some players might still need or want to have that shielding. So I would say it's kind of a buff in the certain situations. It might be a little bit of nerf in some of the PvE scenarios. With that being said, let's now look at her A2. So her A2 I think is a lot more straightforward. It used to be 3 mana at 350% damage, I believe. And now it goes up to 525 damage at the same mana cost. So that is essentially a straight up buff to damage. And it's pretty much the same, I think, as Anastasia's A2 now. Obviously, I'm not sure if her base attack is the same as Anastasia's, but 525 single target damage is quite good. And she definitely will be able to bring a little bit of that burst to your team if you do need one. So I like it, it's great, it's just straight up buff to her A2 with exactly the same mana cost, so definitely a welcome change there. And then lastly, let's take a look at her new passive, shall we? I mean, this is what it's all about, right? She still has cleanse, which is good, able to cleanse dot and other debuffs from all allies and gain 1 mana. Again, it's only gaining 1 mana, but giving her skills only costs 1 and 3 mana. It's okay. And then she also gets the flop. So I know it might be confusing to some of you if you haven't read the patch note, but flop is essentially the same as Ice Shower. I don't know why they decided to change the name, but it functions and works exactly the same way. So whenever Iris has a removal buff or a recovery like heal over time or a positive effect that's applied to her, her attack will be able to add the modification debuff to the opponent. And what modification does is exactly the same as Frosty Bolts, which is just a stun for 3 turns. So there's not really a lot there. And giving her only having, the single target attack on her A2 and the basic attack, it's okay. I don't think this is anything game changing for Iris. It's good that now she has a little bit more of this utility from the debuff, but not what we're here for. And then she still has the Summer's Blessing passive, and exactly like how it used to be, obviously it grants frost damage immunity for 1 turn to all allies at the beginning of the fight. And it's something that won't stack with another Summer's Blessing passive. As we mentioned before, you probably don't want to bring multiple of these heroes in. And it also grants an increased attack to the target by 50% for 9 turns when the frost damage immunity gets removed. So it's pretty good. Obviously the use of this is going to be situational, as it only provides frost damage immunity, so if you're up against a team that's frost heavy or a team that's built around battery, yeah, there's definitely opportunities where you can take advantage of this skill, but otherwise in the other situations you might not. So definitely good to have, but like I said, it's going to be situational. The biggest component of her new Fate Core is the Wet Fog, which is new, and I believe this is going to be something that's only unique to Iris and potentially Valentina, given those are the 2 gold Fate Cores that we have. And what it does is it removes all barriers the enemy has when the enemy uses barrier once per round. I mean, that is huge. And also when the barrier is removed, the enemy gets the Wet Fog mark. And what it does is it decreases the defense of the enemies by 20% of Iris's HP. So let's break that down. I mean, this is absolutely huge, right? I mean, the barrier removal alone is enough to justify this Fate Core, because obviously we're in a situation where we see a lot of these barriers in PvP situations, and it's pretty annoying to deal with because people just spam all these First Guardian heroes and their barriers are hard to deal with. This in many ways kind of get rid of that, but there's a couple of nuances that we need to make sure we understand here. First of all, it's once per round. So it's not as frequent as you might imagine at first. You know, 1 round is when each of the characters has moved once. So there's quite a big gap between the first time you activate this skill and the second time you activate this skill. And also the one thing that we need to understand is that although it removes a barrier, what it doesn't remove is a dragon blood mark on your opponent, right? So there are a couple of things that comes with that. One is, if they do have the dragon's blood, they can still get another barrier up if they ended up getting attacked. And like we mentioned before, this skill only occurs once per round. There's a chance that they might get their barriers refreshed before you even be able to cast this skill again. It's still good, but you know, it's something to be aware of. It's definitely going to be more impactful when there are less heroes on the field, right? So each round goes by just a little bit faster. At the very beginning of the fight, when you have 5-on-5, this might not be as impactful as you may imagine, but the value of it I think will go up as the fight drags on. And also, like we mentioned before, it doesn't remove the Dragon's Blood passive, so that means, one, obviously the opponent will be able to get their shield back up, but also it doesn't stop them from counterattacking, right? So one part of the Wrath passive is that when you have the Dragon Blood, you're able to hit back. So just because you don't have the shield, it doesn't mean the enemy won't return fire back to you. So something to keep in mind, it definitely does not completely negate everything that comes with the First Guardian kit, but taking down that barrier is very, very useful, especially if you can time it right, where you can remove the barrier and then have one of your Heart Hitter follow up with a nuke to take out their First Guardian hero in the backline. I think the value of that is super high. But obviously there needs to be a little bit of strategy when it comes to using this skill. And then we haven't even gotten to the second part, which is this whole Wet Fog mark. And what it does is it decreases defense by 20% of your own maximum health. And I think this part is also just so insane. Just to put it into perspective, if we're looking at Iris Fate Core here, and if you look at her defense is 58, right? And her HP is 518. So what this means is 20% of Iris' HP is going to be a little bit over 100, and she only has 58 defense, right? So like essentially she will be able to remove all the defense of the opponent and allowing you to do essentially true damage to the opponent. I mean, that is huge. Obviously this is simplified math. When you do have the gears and other skill effects layered on that, it won't be as straightforward as this, but still, this is substantial because it is based on HP, and 20% of HP is always going to be a significant chunk of your defense. Just because the way this game is set up, HP is just so much higher than your defense. So this is a very, very impactful skill. The fact that it can remove so much of the opponent's defense is crazy. And the fact that this can be applied to everyone that has a barrier means you're likely going to have this on multiple targets, because obviously the First Guardian passive, the way it works is it applies shields to several targets in the back line or the front line. So I think this skill is definitely going to be very useful. So all in all, do we think Iris is worth it? Absolutely. It definitely opens up a lot more of the game, and I think it's going to be a breath of fresh air to this game because obviously right now it feels a little bit stale with all the First Guardian heroes dominating the PvP situation. I think what this will do is it'll give people a second thought about bringing First Guardian heroes into the fight, and it'll allow a lot of the other heroes that are currently being overlooked get an opportunity to kind of shine. It's going to add a lot more diversity to how we play this game, and I am super excited about that. But with that being said, that's all we have on Fate Core Iris. Hopefully you guys are excited about this as we are. Definitely good luck to every one of you who are going to be spending your Xyz on the Fate Core Iris. She's definitely worth it, and sincerely we hope that you get it as well. And lastly, if you think we missed anything or disagree with some of the things that we said, please let us know in the comment section down below. And if you want to see other Fate Core reviews or other Exos hero related videos, feel free to check out our other content as well. But with that being said, if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like and subscribe, and we will see you soon in the next episode. Bye bye.